Eliza's arms wrapped around him, and Ethan Cole's heart shattered. Not from disappointment, from terror. She was real, solid, warm against his chest after 6 months of letters that had convinced him he deserved this, that a broken-down cowboy could earn something beautiful through honest words. But standing at that train station with her pressed against him, breathing in the travel dust on her clothes, and feeling her pulse race against his ribs, he understood with crushing clarity that he'd lied to himself. Words on paper couldn't prepare him for this weight, the responsibility of someone who'd sacrificed everything for him. "I can't be what you need," he whispered into her hair, and meant it. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and follow this journey all the way to the end. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let's begin. Ethan Cole didn't answer Jake. He couldn't. The envelope sat on the rough wooden table between them, like a living thing, like something that could change everything or destroy what little remained. His throat worked, but no words came. "Open it," Jake said, his voice gentler now. "Or I will." "Get out." "Ethan." "I said get out." The words tore from somewhere deep, somewhere raw. Jake's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. They'd been friends too long for that. Through range wars and droughts, through the deaths that had carved Ethan into something harder than the New Mexico stone. Jake had earned the right to stand his ground. "You've been half dead for 3 years," Jake said quietly. "Walking, working, breathing, but not living. I watched you write that advertisement. Watched you argue with yourself for 2 hours before you finally sealed it and sent it off. You wanted this. I was drunk. You were sober as Sunday morning, and you know it." Jake stepped closer, his weathered face serious in the lamplight. "Sarah's been gone 5 years, Ethan. Your brother's been dead longer than that. At some point, you gotta decide if you're gonna honor their memory by living or dishonor it by dying slow." The name hit like a fist. Sarah. The woman who'd promised to wait, who'd written him letters during that brutal winter drive north, who'd married the banker's son 6 months later, when Ethan came back with nothing but debt and a broken arm. He'd loved her with everything he had, and it hadn't been enough. This ain't about Sarah. Then what's it about? Ethan's jaw clenched. What if I open it and she's real? What if she's everything I wrote about wanting, and I'm still the same man who wasn't enough before? Silence filled the small cabin. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters Ethan had meant to fix last month. The lamplight flickered, casting shadows across Jake's face. "Then, you find out," Jake said finally. "But sitting here staring at that letter, like it's gonna bite you, that's just another way of running, and you've run far enough." Jake left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. Ethan sat alone with the envelope and the sound of his own heartbeat. The handwriting was elegant, careful, the kind of script that spoke of education, of a life very different from his own. He'd written his advertisement honestly, maybe too honestly. No flowery language about romance or destiny. Just facts. 34-year-old cowboy building a small ranch in New Mexico territory, looking for a woman who wanted something real, something solid, even if it wasn't easy. He'd expected nothing. Part of him had hoped for nothing because nothing couldn't hurt you. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal. "Dear Mr. Cole, I read your advertisement 3 times before I convinced myself to write this letter. I'm not sure what I'm looking for, and I'm even less sure what you might find in someone like me, but your words struck something I thought I'd buried years ago, the idea that honesty might matter more than pretty promises. My name is Eliza Hart. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a seamstress in Boston. I won't waste your time with elaborate descriptions or false modesty. I'm plain-spoken stubborn when I believe I'm right, and I've spent the last decade caring for relatives who see me as an obligation they're too Christian to abandon, but too resentful to value. I'm writing because your advertisement didn't ask for beauty or charm or any of the things men usually want. You asked for someone who wanted something real. I don't know if I'm brave enough for real, Mr. Cole, but I'm tired enough of pretending to be willing to try. If you're still interested after reading this, I'd like to hear about your life. Not the parts you think, I want to hear the parts that are true. Respectfully, Eliza Hart. Ethan read the letter 4 times. Each time different words caught him. Plain spoken, stubborn, tired of pretending. There was no coyness here, no attempt to charm or seduce. Just the same kind of raw honesty he'd tried to put in his own words, the same exhaustion with a life that looked fine from the outside, but felt hollow within. He should throw it away, should recognize this for what it was, 2 lonely people reaching for something they'd probably destroy through proximity and reality. Distance and letters could hide 1,000 flaws. The moment they met face to face, whatever illusion they'd built would shatter like January ice. Instead, he found himself pulling out paper and a pen. Miss Hart. I'm not good with words, so I'll just say this straight. Your letter is the first honest thing I've read in years, and I'm grateful for it. You asked about my life, the true parts. Here they are. I work 16-hour days because it's easier than sitting still. I built this cabin with my own hands, but most nights I sleep in the barn because the cabin feels too big and too empty. I lost my brother in a range war 7 years ago, lost my parents to cholera before that, and lost a woman I thought I'd marry because I wasn't the man she needed me to be. I'm not looking for someone to fix me, Miss Hart. I'm broken in ways that don't fix. But I'm looking for someone who's willing to build something new anyway, even if we're both working with damaged materials. If that sounds like something you'd consider, I'd like to keep writing. I won't make you any promises I can't keep, but I can promise you honesty, respect, and whatever else I've got to give. Ethan Cole. He sealed the letter before he could second-guess himself and rode into town the next morning to post it. The ride back felt different somehow, longer and shorter at the same time. The landscape he'd stopped noticing years ago suddenly seemed sharper, more vivid. Dangerous territory, that kind of thinking. 3 weeks passed. Every day, Ethan rode into town to check for mail, and every day, nothing. Jake watched him wear a path in the dirt road, but said nothing, which was worse than commentary. Ethan told himself he'd been right to expect nothing, that Eliza Hart had probably received his letter, and realized he was exactly what she'd feared, a broken man with nothing to offer but hard work and harder truths. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, when the heat was thick enough to choke on a letter, arrived. Mr. Cole. Your honesty terrifies me. I've spent my entire life around people who dress up their disappointments in polite language and call it civility. You just laid yours out like cards on a table, and I don't know whether to admire your courage or fear that I don't have enough of my own to match it. But here's my truth. I'm tired, Mr. Cole. I'm tired of being the good daughter, the dutiful niece, the woman who sacrifices everything for people who barely notice I exist until they need something. I'm tired of sewing dresses for other women's weddings, while my own life sits in a corner gathering dust. I'm tired of pretending that this is enough. You asked if I'd consider building something new with damaged materials. The answer is yes, but only if you're willing to be patient with someone who's never built anything before. I can sew a straight seam and balance a household budget, but I've never had the chance to build a life that was mine. I don't know if I'll be any good at it. Tell me about your days. Not the work, I understand work. Tell me about the moments in between, the things you notice, the thoughts you don't share with anyone else. Your honest correspondent, Eliza. Something cracked open in Ethan's chest. Something he'd thought had calcified beyond repair. He wrote back that same night, sitting at the table with the lamp burning low, and for the first time in years the words came easily. He told her about the way the light hit the mountains at dawn, turning them purple and gold. Told her about the mare who'd foaled last spring, how he'd sat up 3 nights straight, making sure both survived, and how the colt still followed him around like he was its mother. He told her about the silence that used to comfort him, but now just felt like absence, and how her letters were starting to fill spaces he hadn't known were empty. Her response came faster this time. Ethan. I'm presuming to use your first name. Tell me if that's too familiar. Your description of the foaling made me cry, which is ridiculous, but the way you wrote about it, the care, the patience, the fear that you wouldn't be enough to save them, I understood that. I've felt that way about everything in my life, like I'm just barely keeping things alive, never quite sure if I'm doing it right. You asked in your last letter what I notice in the moments between work. Here's what I see. Women come into the shop and I measure them for wedding gowns or ball gowns or traveling suits. I watch their faces as they look in the mirror, and sometimes I see joy, but more often I see resignation. They're putting on costumes for roles they've been assigned. I wonder if they know there are other options. I wonder if I know. My aunt told me yesterday that I'm getting too old to be particular, that I should accept Mr. Patterson's proposal before I end up alone and useless. Mr. Patterson owns 3 dry goods stores and a receding hairline. He's perfectly nice, perfectly boring, and perfectly wrong. But my aunt thinks security and passion are mutually exclusive, and that anyone my age should be grateful for the former and forget the latter. I'm not writing to you because I'm looking for security, Ethan. I'm writing because your letters make me feel less alone. Is that reason enough? Eliza Ethan's response was immediate. Eliza, use my name, please. It's reason enough. It's the only reason that matters. I'm not a romantic man. I don't believe in fate or destiny or any of that. But I believe in this 2 people deciding they'd rather face the hard truths together than face easy lies alone. You asked if that's reason enough. It's the best reason I've ever heard. Turn down Mr. Patterson. You deserve more than perfectly nice. You deserve someone who sees you not just the role you're supposed to fill. Your letters make me feel less broken. That might not sound like much, but it's everything. Ethan. The months that followed built something neither of them had expected. The letters came more frequently, twice a week, then 3 times, then almost daily. They stopped being careful with their words, stopped editing themselves. Eliza wrote about her frustration with her aunt's passive cruelty, about the way her cousins took her labor for granted, about the dreams she'd given up so long ago. She'd almost forgotten they existed. Ethan wrote about the nightmares that still woke him, about the guilt of surviving when his brother hadn't, about the fear that he was too damaged for anything good to last. You've been smiling, Jake observed one afternoon as they mended fence line. It's unsettling. Shut up. How many letters now? None of your business. So at least 30. Jake hammered in a post, grinning. When are you going to ask her to come out here? The question hit Ethan harder than it should have. She's got a life in Boston. A life she hates, from what you've told me. I've got nothing to offer her, Jake. This ranch is half built. I'm barely breaking even. She's not asking for a mansion, Ethan. She's asking for a reason to leave. You gonna give her one, or you gonna let fear make your decisions? That night, Ethan stared at blank paper for 2 hours before he finally wrote Eliza. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think about it carefully before you answer. Don't respond from loneliness or fear or anything except honest consideration. Come west. Come to New Mexico. Come see if what we've built in these letters can survive reality. I won't lie to you about what you'd be walking into. The house I'm building is small, 2 rooms, a loft, a kitchen that's barely functional. The land is beautiful, but unforgiving. The work is hard. The isolation can be crushing. I can't promise you comfort or ease or any of the things you might be leaving behind. But I can promise you this. You won't be invisible anymore. You won't be an obligation or a burden or anything except a woman. I want to build a life with, if you're willing. Think about it. Take your time. I'll wait as long as you need. Ethan. 3 weeks of silence followed. The longest 3 weeks of Ethan's life. He convinced himself she'd come to her senses, realized that letters were one thing, but actually uprooting her entire life for a stranger was insanity. He worked himself into exhaustion every day, trying not to count the hours since he'd posted that letter, trying not to imagine her reading it and laughing at his presumption. Then the letter came. Ethan, I'm terrified. I've never been this terrified in my entire life. But yes, my answer is yes. I'm leaving Boston in 2 weeks. I'll take the train as far west as the lines run, then whatever stage or wagon train can get me the rest of the way. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm brave or stupid or both. But I know that staying here living this half-life watching years disappear while I sow other women's dreams, that's a slower death than any risk I might take on the frontier. You said I won't be invisible anymore. I'm holding you to that promise. I'm coming, Ethan. I'm coming, and I'm terrified, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Eliza Ethan read the letter 10 times, and each time the reality of it hit harder. She was coming. A woman he'd never met, never touched, never seen a woman who existed only in words and imagination, was upending her entire existence to come to him. The panic set in around midnight. What if she arrived and realized he wasn't the man in the letters? What if proximity revealed all the flaws distance had hidden? What if he wasn't enough, just like he hadn't been enough for Sarah, hadn't been enough to save his brother, hadn't been enough to keep his parents alive? "Stop," he said aloud to the empty cabin. His voice sounded foreign. "She knows what she's getting. You told her the truth." But truth in letters was different from truth in flesh and blood. Words could be controlled, edited, perfected. Reality was messy and flawed and unforgiving. He had 2 weeks to finish the house. 2 weeks to make it something a woman could live in without feeling like she'd made the worst mistake of her life. 2 weeks to prepare himself for the moment when fantasy would collide with reality and reveal whether they'd built something real or just convinced themselves they had. Jake helped him work 18-hour days. They finished the loft, repaired the kitchen stove, built a proper front porch. Ethan bought furniture in town, a bed frame, a table with real chairs, curtains for the windows. Small things, practical things, things that might make the house feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a home. "You're shaking." Jake observed the morning Ethan was supposed to ride to town to meet the stage. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're terrified she'll take one look at you and realize you're not what she expected." "Get out of my head, Jake." "Can't. You're too obvious." Jake's expression softened. "Listen to me. She's not Sarah. This isn't the same situation. You're not the same man you were then. Stop trying to protect yourself from something that hasn't even happened yet." But Ethan couldn't stop. The fear had teeth now sharp and insistent. What if Eliza stepped off that stage, saw him, and the disappointment in her eyes killed whatever they'd built? What if she was too beautiful, too refined, too everything for a man who spent his days covered in dirt and his nights fighting nightmares? The ride to town felt both endless and far too short. Ethan's hands wouldn't stop shaking. His mouth tasted like copper. The stage was late, which only made everything worse. He paced outside the depot, aware of the curious looks from townspeople who'd never seen him, this agitated. Then he heard it, the sound of horses and wheels, the driver's shout. The stage rolled into town in a cloud of dust, and Ethan's heart tried to climb out of his chest through his throat. 3 passengers stepped down. A businessman in a rumpled suit. An older couple, clearly prosperous, clearly not staying. And then, she was smaller than he'd imagined. Dark hair, simply dressed, carrying a single worn carpet bag. She looked around with wide eyes searching, and when her gaze landed on him, she went completely still. They stood there 20 feet apart, staring at each other like two people who'd just realized they'd jumped off a cliff with no idea if they could fly. Then Eliza smiled, small, terrified, hopeful, and started walking toward him. Ethan met her halfway, and when he did, when he finally stood close enough to see the flecks of amber in her brown eyes, to smell the travel dust on her clothes, to notice the way her hands were shaking as badly as his own, he understood with perfect clarity that everything he'd feared was real, and absolutely nothing had prepared him for how much worse and how much better this moment would be than anything he'd imagined. "Hello, Ethan," she said quietly, and her voice was exactly as he'd imagined it, and nothing like he'd expected all at the same time. "Hello, Eliza." His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "You came." "I came." Her smile wavered. "I'm absolutely terrified." Me too. Something in her eyes shifted at that admission, surprise maybe, or relief. You want to tell me what we just did? Built something on faith and letters and hope that reality won't break it. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. He reached for her bag, their fingers brushing for just a moment. The contact shot through him like lightning. Real. She was real. We'll find out which. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked up at him with those honest, terrified, hopeful eyes and said the words that would change everything. Then let's find out together. The wagon ride started in silence. Ethan had borrowed Jake's better rig for the occasion, and now he sat beside Eliza on the narrow bench, acutely aware of every inch of space between them. Her carpet bag rested at her feet. His hands gripped the reins, two tight knuckles white against the leather. How far? Eliza asked after 10 minutes of nothing but wheels and wind. 2 hours. Maybe 3 if the creek's high. That's a long ride. It's a long way from anywhere. He glanced at her, then away. I told you it was isolated. You did. She adjusted her skirts and he caught a glimpse of worn boot leather beneath the hem. Practical boots, not the fancy kind. You were honest about everything. So were you. The words came out rougher than intended. In your letters, I mean. And now we're supposed to figure out if honesty on paper translates to real life. Yeah. Another stretch of silence. Ethan's jaw clenched. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In his head, they'd fall into easy conversation like they had in the letters. Reality was proving him a fool. Ask me something, Eliza said suddenly. What? Ask me something. Anything. We wrote to each other for months, but now we're sitting here like strangers at a funeral. Ask me something you wanted to know but never wrote down. Ethan's mind went blank. Then, without thinking, are you already regretting this? Her breath caught. Yes. She turned to look at him fully. And no, both at the same time. Does that make sense? More than you know. Your turn. What are you regretting? That I can't be the man in the letters. That man had time to think before he spoke, could cross out mistakes, could be better than he actually is. Eliza's laugh surprised him, short, sharp, genuine. You think I edited myself? Ethan, half those letters I wrote drunk on cooking sherry at 2 a.m, crying because I was so desperate to tell someone the truth that I couldn't stop myself. Something loosened in his chest. The one about your aunt calling you an ungrateful burden. Definitely drunk. I almost didn't send it. Thought you'd think I was pathetic. I thought you were brave. She looked away, but not before he caught the shine in her eyes. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. That's the same thing. Is it? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. Because right now I'm terrified I just made the biggest mistake of my life, and I can't even blame anyone but myself. The horses stumbled over a rough patch, and Eliza lurched sideways. Ethan's arm shot out instinctively, catching her before she could fall. For a moment they stayed like that. His hand on her arm, her body pressed against his side, both of them frozen by the contact. Sorry, he said, not moving. Don't be. She didn't move either. That's the first time you've touched me on purpose. Is that what you want me to touch you? The question hung between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said. Eliza pulled back slowly, putting space between them again, but her voice stayed steady. I want you to stop acting like I'm made of glass. Or like you're some kind of brute who might break me. We're both scared. Let's at least be honest about it. Fair enough. Ethan flexed his hands on the reins. You want honesty? Here it is. I've been building scenarios in my head for 2 weeks straight. Half of them end with you taking one look at my place and demanding I take you back to town. The other half end with us making it a month before you realize you've trapped yourself with a man who doesn't know how to be what you need. And you think I haven't been doing the same thing. Eliza's voice cracked. I spent the entire train ride convinced you'd take one look at me and see exactly what my aunt sees, a plain, difficult woman who's too old and too stubborn to be worth the trouble. That you'd be kind about it probably, but I'd see the disappointment anyway. You're not plain. Don't lie to me, Ethan. That's the one thing we can't do to each other. I'm not lying. He stopped, frustration burning in his throat. I don't know the right words, but you're standing right there in front of me and you're exactly what I saw in those letters. Sharp and scared and strong. That's not plain. Her hands twisted in her lap. Then why does this feel so hard? We were good at the letters. Because letters don't require you to look someone in the eye when you're vulnerable. Letters don't have to deal with the fact that I smell like horse and sweat, or that your hair's coming loose and you've got dust on your cheek, or that we're about to spend the next however many years trying to build something out of nothing. Is that what we're doing? Isn't it? Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then, my aunt said I was running away, that I was using you as an excuse to escape my responsibilities. Maybe she was right. Were you using me? I don't know. The admission came out raw. Maybe at first, maybe that's how it started, but somewhere between the first letter and the 15th, it stopped being about escape and started being about... She stopped. About what? About wanting. About believing I deserved to want something for myself, instead of just existing for everyone else. The honesty in her voice cut through every defense Ethan had built. Then we're doing the same thing. I told myself I placed that advertisement because Jake wouldn't stop nagging me. But the truth is, I was dying. Slow and quiet, but dying all the same. Your letters made me want to live again. No pressure then. Despite everything, he almost smiled. None at all. They crested a rise and Ethan pulled the horses to a stop. There, he said, pointing toward a small structure in the distance. That's home. Eliza leaned forward, squinting against the afternoon sun. The house looked smaller from here than it actually was, 2 rooms. A covered porch smoke rising from the chimney where Jake had promised to keep a fire going. The barn was bigger than the house. The land stretched out in every direction, empty and endless. It's very... Eliza trailed off. Small, remote, not much to look at. I know. I was going to say honest. She glanced at him. It looks exactly like what you described. No pretense, no false promises. That disappoint you? Ask me in a week. They covered the last mile in renewed silence, but it felt different now, less suffocating, more like 2 people gathering courage. When they finally pulled up to the house, Jake emerged from the barn, grinning like he'd won money on a bet. So you're real, he called out to Eliza. I was starting to think Ethan made you up. Jake, this is Eliza. Ethan climbed down, then turned to help her. Their hands met again, and this time neither of them pulled away immediately. Eliza, this is Jake. He's the friend who wouldn't stop nagging you. Eliza smiled, and Ethan felt something shift. He mentioned you in his letters. Only the good parts, I hope. Jake's eyes darted between them, reading everything Ethan was trying not to show. I'll leave you 2 to get settled. Ethan, I stocked the pantry like you asked. Left some stew on the stove. Anything else, you know where to find me. He was gone before Ethan could respond, leaving them alone with the house and the truth of what they'd done. Well? Eliza said, still standing beside the wagon. Should we go inside? You don't have to do this, Ethan said suddenly. If you want to go back to town, stay at the boarding house until the next stage. I'll pay for it. No judgment. No hard feelings. Just because you came this far doesn't mean you're trapped. Eliza turned to face him fully. Do you want me to leave? No. God, no. But I want you to stay because you want to, not because you feel obligated. Then stop giving me exit doors, Ethan. I'm here. I chose this. Now let me see what I chose. The house was cleaner than he'd ever managed to keep it. Jake had clearly spent hours scrubbing and organizing. Fresh curtains hung in the windows courtesy of Mrs. Henderson in town, who'd refused payment and wished him luck with a knowing smile that had made his ears burn. The bed was made with new quilts. The table was set with dishes that didn't match but were clean. A pot of wildflowers sat in the center, already wilting in the heat. Eliza walked through, slowly trailing her fingers along the rough wooden walls. She peered into the bedroom, examined the kitchen, climbed the ladder to check the loft. Ethan stood in the doorway, waiting for the verdict, his heart hammering so hard he thought his ribs might crack. "You built this yourself?" she finally asked. "Most of it. Jake helped with the roof." "It's solid work." She came back to stand in front of him. "Honest work, like the letters." "But is it enough?" The question escaped before he could stop it, and Eliza's expression shifted into something he couldn't read. "Enough for what?" "For you to stay. To build a life here. To not wake up 6 months from now and hate yourself for choosing this." "I can't answer that yet." She held his gaze. "Neither can you. We're going to have to figure it out as we go." "That's not very reassuring. Would you prefer I lie and say everything will be perfect?" "No." "Then stop asking questions neither of us can answer." She moved past him into the kitchen, examining the stew pot. "I'm assuming you expect me to cook." "I what?" "Cook. Clean. Keep house. Isn't that the arrangement? I'm trying to understand what my role is here." Anger flashed through Ethan's confusion. "Your role?" "Yes, what you expect from me, in exchange for—" She gestured vaguely around the house. "This. In exchange—" He stepped closer, voice dropping dangerously low. "Eliza, you're not an employee. This isn't a transaction." "Then what is it?" She whirled to face him, and for the first time, he saw the fear beneath her composure. "Because I need to know, Ethan. I need to know what happens if I can't be what you need. If I'm not a good enough cook or housekeeper or whatever it is you're expecting. I need to know if you'll send me back or if I'll be stuck here with a man who resents me for failing to be worth the trouble." The words hit him like a fist to the gut. "Is that what you think? That I'm keeping some kind of score? That you have to earn the right to stay? I don't know what to think. I've spent my entire life earning the right to exist in other people's spaces. I don't know how to just be somewhere. Without justification." Ethan closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but he made sure she couldn't look away. "Listen to me. You're here because I want you here. Not your cooking or cleaning or anything except you. If the house falls apart and we eat nothing but burnt beans for a year, you're still welcome. If you hate it here and want to leave tomorrow, I'll take you. But don't you dare reduce yourself to a list of chores and skills, because that's not what I asked for." "Then what did you ask for?" The question came out broken. "A partner. Someone to build something with. Someone who sees me and lets me see her back. That's all. That's everything." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes and she wiped them away angrily. "I'm sorry. I'm being ridiculous. It's just—" "You're not being ridiculous. You're being scared. So am I." He risked putting a hand on her shoulder, gentle enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "We're going to mess this up, Eliza. Probably multiple times. We're going to say the wrong things and misunderstand each other and wonder what the hell we were thinking. But we're going to do it together, and we're going to figure it out. Deal?" She searched his face, looking for something reassurance maybe, or proof that he meant what he said. Whatever she found must have been enough, because she nodded slowly. "Deal." "Good." He released her shoulder, already missing the contact. "Now about that stew. I can't cook worth a damn, but I can heat up what Jake made without poisoning us. That's a start." "That's more than a start." Her smile was watery but real. "That's practically a miracle for a cowboy." They ate dinner at the small table, sitting across from each other like 2 chess players studying the board. The stew was good. Jake knew his way around a pot, and the silence between them gradually shifted from tense to something almost comfortable. "Tell me about the horses," Eliza said, breaking the quiet. "You mentioned them in your letters, but I want to hear more." So he told her. About the mare who'd lost her foal the year before, and how she'd adopted an abandoned colt as her own. About the stallion who was too smart for his own good, and kept figuring out how to open the gate. About the work involved in keeping them fed and healthy through brutal winters and drought-ridden summers. "You love them," Eliza observed. "They're honest. They don't expect more than you can give, and they don't pretend to be something they're not. Unlike people. Unlike most people." He met her eyes. "Present company excluded. We'll see if you still think that in a month. We'll see if you do." Darkness fell while they cleaned up, and the temperature dropped with it. Ethan watched Eliza shiver despite the fire he'd stoked in the hearth. Boston cold was different from New Mexico cold, damper maybe, or more forgiving. Out here the chill had teeth. "You'll need warmer clothes," he said. "I'll take you into town this week, see what Mrs. Henderson can put together. I can make my own clothes, I just need fabric and time." "Then we'll get fabric." He hesitated. "You should take the bedroom, I'll sleep in the loft." Eliza's head snapped up. "That's not, we can't." She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "Ethan, I came here understanding that we'd be—" She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "I know what you understood." His voice gentled. "But we're strangers who happen to know each other's hearts. That doesn't mean we have to rush the rest. Take your time. Take whatever time you need. And if I need months, years." The question hung heavy between them. "Then I'll wait months or years. I'm not a patient man, Eliza, but I'm patient enough for this." She stood there visibly struggling with something. Finally, "What if I'm not worth waiting for? Then I'll have wasted my time on someone honest and brave and willing to take a chance on a broken-down cowboy. Sounds like a pretty good waste to me." The laugh that escaped her was half-sob. "You're either the best man I've ever met or the most skilled liar. I can't figure out which. Give it time. You'll figure it out." He moved toward the ladder. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start working through the awkward parts." "Ethan." He paused, one hand on the ladder rung. "Yeah. Thank you for not expecting me to have all the answers right away." "Same to you." He climbed to the loft, stripped down to his undershirt, and lay on the narrow cot Jake had set up. Below, he could hear Eliza moving around the bedroom, the rustle of fabric, the creak of the bed frame, the small sounds of someone trying to get comfortable in an unfamiliar space. Sleep didn't come. His mind raced with everything that had happened, everything that could still go wrong. She was here, real and solid and terrified. Just like him. They'd built something in those letters, something genuine, something worth protecting. Now they had to figure out if that thing could survive the weight of reality and proximity and all the small disappointments that came with truly knowing another person. "Ethan?" Her voice drifted up from below. "Yeah. I'm glad I came, even if I'm terrified, even if we have no idea what we're doing. I'm glad." His throat closed up. "Me too." Morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Ethan woke to the sound of someone moving around the kitchen. The clatter of pots, the scrape of a spoon, the smell of something burning. He climbed down to find Eliza standing over the stove, glaring at a pan of what might have once been eggs. "I can sew a wedding gown from memory," she said, without looking up. "But apparently, I can't cook breakfast without setting it on fire. That takes skill. Jake usually just serves cold beans. This is worse than cold beans." She abandoned the pan and turned to face him, looking both defeated and defiant. "I warned you I didn't know what I was doing. Did you think I was lying when I said I didn't care? I thought you were being polite. I don't do polite. I do honest." He moved to the stove, examining the damage. "These aren't beyond saving. They're just creative." Despite herself, Eliza smiled. "That's one word for it." They ate the creative eggs together, and neither of them mentioned that they tasted like burnt leather and regret. After breakfast, Ethan showed her around the property, the barn, the small vegetable garden he'd been neglecting, the creek that ran along the eastern boundary. He tried to see it through her eyes, sparse, rough, demanding. Nothing like the life she'd left. He admitted as they stood looking out over the land. That's something you should know. There's always something that needs fixing or tending or rebuilding. It doesn't let up. Neither did Boston. At least here the work builds towards something that's mine. She glanced at him. Ours. The word ours did something to him, made the land look different, like it was expanding instead of closing in. There's a dance in town next month, he said abruptly. Usually I don't go, but if you wanted to meet people, make some friends. Will you dance with me? The question caught him off guard. I'm not good at it. Neither am I. But I asked anyway. Then yes, I'll dance with you. Fair warning, I'll probably step on your feet. Fair warning, I'll probably step on yours right back. They stood there in the morning sun, two people trying to navigate the gap between what they'd imagined and what actually was. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But it was real, and maybe that was enough to build on. Eliza. Yes. I'm really glad you came. Even if we burn everything we try to cook. Even if neither of us knows what we're doing. I'm really glad you're here. She reached out and took his hand, tentative, uncertain, but deliberate. Ask me again in a month. If I'm still here, that'll be your answer. And if you're not, then at least we tried something brave instead of settling for safe. Her hand stayed in his as they walked back to the house, and Ethan let himself hope that a month from now, she'd still be there. Burned eggs, awkward silences, fears and all. The month that followed tested everything they'd promised each other. Eliza learned that Ethan woke at 4 every morning, silent as a ghost, and didn't speak until he'd had coffee. Ethan learned that Eliza talked to herself when she was frustrated, carrying on full arguments with invisible opponents while she worked. They learned each other's rhythms and triggers, the small ways they protected themselves from being fully seen. On the 10th day, Eliza found him in the barn at midnight, unable to sleep, brushing down horses that didn't need brushing. Nightmare? She asked from the doorway. Something like that. She moved closer, wrapping her shawl tighter against the cold. You want to talk about it? No. Then I'll sit here and not talk with you. And she did. For an hour, she sat on a hay bale while he worked through whatever demons had chased him from the house, and when he finally stopped and turned to her, the gratitude in his eyes was so raw it hurt to look at. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not making me explain. For just being here. That's what we promised, isn't it, to figure this out together? He nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. They walked back to the house in silence, and something between them shifted, not fixed, but acknowledged. The cracks were real, but they weren't running from them. By the 3rd week, they'd established routines. Eliza took over the garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil with a determination that bordered on fury. Ethan taught her to ride, which resulted in more cursing than he'd ever heard from a woman, and a bruised tailbone that made her wince for days. They worked side by side, mending fences, and Eliza's hands blistered until they bled, but she refused to stop. You don't have to prove anything, Ethan told her as he wrapped her hands in clean cloth one evening. Yes, I do. To myself, if no one else. You're already the toughest woman I know. That's because you don't know many women. But she smiled when she said it, and he realized with sudden clarity that he was falling in love with her, not the woman in the letters, but this real stubborn bleeding hands version who refused to be anything less than fully present. The realization terrified him. The 4th week brought visitors. Mrs. Henderson from town arrived with fresh bread and thinly veiled curiosity, examining Eliza with sharp eyes that missed nothing. So you're the letter bride, she said not unkindly. Brave of you coming all this way for a man you'd never met. Brave or foolish, Eliza replied. I suppose time will tell which. Same thing often enough. Mrs. Henderson's gaze shifted to Ethan. You treating her right? Trying to? Try harder. Good women are scarce out here, and this one looks like she's got spine. She turned back to Eliza. You need anything at all, you come find me in town. Don't suffer in silence, thinking you have to make it work just because you came this far. After she left, Eliza stood very still in the kitchen. Does everyone think I'm trapped here? Maybe. Are they right? Are you trapped? Ethan asked, keeping his voice level, even as fear clawed at his chest. I don't know yet. She met his eyes. Ask me tomorrow. Tomorrow became the next day, then the next, and the question hung between them like smoke, impossible to grasp, but impossible to ignore. They were circling something, both of them feeling it, but neither willing to name it first. Then Jake showed up with news that changed everything. Matthews is selling his land, he announced, bursting through the door without knocking. 500 acres bordering your eastern property line. Good water rights, decent grazing. He's asking a fair price, but it won't last long. Ethan's heart sank. I don't have that kind of money. Bank might loan it to you. You've been making payments on time, building something solid here, with a wife to show you're settling down. Jake stopped, glancing at Eliza. Sorry, not trying to reduce you to collateral. But that's what I am, isn't it? Eliza's voice was flat. Proof that Ethan's a stable investment. Eliza. No, it makes sense. A married man looks more responsible, more likely to stick around and repay loans. I'm literally increasing your property value by existing. The bitterness in her tone cut deep. Jake looked between them, clearly wishing he'd kept his mouth shut. I'm gonna go. Talk later, Ethan. The door closed behind him, and silence crashed down like a fallen tree. Ethan stared at Eliza, trying to read the expression on her face. Anger, yes. But beneath it, something else. Something that looked like betrayal. You think that's why I asked you here, he said carefully, to make myself look good to bankers. Isn't it convenient timing? You place an advertisement, find a desperate woman willing to come west, and suddenly you're marriage material. Very neat. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Ethan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I walked right into something I didn't fully understand. His temper flared. You want to know what happened? I was dying inside, slowly, quietly turning into stone. Your letters woke me up, made me remember what it felt like to want something besides just survival. That's what happened. If you think I was calculating enough to plan all this, you don't know me at all. Maybe I don't? Maybe we wrote pretty words to each other and convinced ourselves that was the same as actually knowing each other, and now we're stuck trying to make it work because we're both too proud to admit we made a mistake. The words hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard it ached. Is that what you think? This is a mistake? I don't know what this is. Eliza's voice cracked. I don't know if I'm your wife or your investment, or just the woman you settled for because she was desperate enough to say yes. I don't know if you want me, or if you just wanted someone, and I happened to be convenient. Convenient. The word came out like poison. You think any of this has been convenient? Lying awake every night terrified you'll realize I'm not worth the risk you took. Walking on eggshells, trying to give you space while wanting nothing more than to... He stopped himself, breathing hard. Then to what? To know if you feel anything for me besides fear and obligation. The confession stripped him bare, left him standing defenseless in his own kitchen. Eliza stared at him, eyes wide and shining with unshed tears. You're an idiot, she whispered. Probably. I came here because of you, not because I was desperate, though I was. Not because I wanted to escape, though I did. I came because your letters made me believe that maybe, possibly, there was someone in the world who could see me. Really see me. Not what I could do for them, not what role I could fill, but me. The stubborn, difficult, too old to be picky me. And I'm terrified because what if I'm wrong? What if I invested everything in a fantasy and the real you doesn't actually want the real me? Ethan closed the distance between them in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, but he made sure she couldn't look away. The real me is standing right here, and I want the real you. The one who argues with herself in the garden. The one who can't cook eggs but refuses to give up. The one who's scared and stubborn and brave enough to bleed for vegetables. That's who I want. Even though I'm difficult. Especially because you're difficult. Easy doesn't build anything worth keeping. Eliza's composure cracked. A sob escaped, then another, and suddenly she was crying deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she'd kept locked down for years. Ethan pulled her against his chest, and she clung to him like a drowning person finding driftwood. "I'm so tired of being afraid," she gasped against his shirt. "I'm so tired of waiting for the moment when you realize I'm not worth it." "Then stop waiting." His arms tightened around her. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not sending you back. You're not on trial here, Eliza. This is your home. Your home." She cried harder at that, and he let her, holding her through it, until the storm passed and she was just breathing against him, exhausted and empty. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy, and her eyes were red, and Ethan thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "I need you to understand something," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm not good at this. At trusting. At believing things can work out. I've spent my whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I don't know how to stop. Then we'll wait for it together. And when it drops, if it drops, we'll deal with it. Both of us." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's possible. That's all we need." She studied his face, looking for cracks in his certainty. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll try. To trust this, to trust you. But you have to be patient with me when I panic." "Same here. I'm going to mess this up, Eliza. Probably more than once. Then we'll mess it up together." A watery smile tugged at her lips. "That's romantic in a twisted sort of way." "We're a twisted sort of people." The tension broke, and she actually laughed, a real laugh, not the careful one she'd been rationing out. Ethan felt something in his chest unlock something that had been holding him rigid since the day she arrived. "The land," Eliza said suddenly. "Matthew's property. You should try for it." "Eliza, I mean it. If it's a good opportunity, pursue it. Don't let my insecurities stop you from building something real here." "Our insecurities," he corrected. "They're ours now. That's how this works." She reached up and touched his face, her calloused fingers gentle against his jaw. "When did you become wise?" "About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other in the fading afternoon light, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Ethan let himself believe they might actually survive this. Not just survive, thrive. Build something that was theirs, flaws and all. The next morning they rode into town together to meet with the bank. The banker, a stern man named Peterson, looked them over with undisguised skepticism. "You've been married how long?" he asked, pen poised over paperwork. "A month," Ethan said. "And before that you knew each other how long?" "Through letters. 6 months of letters." Peterson's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "I see. And you expect me to loan you money based on a correspondence courtship?" "I expect you to loan me money based on my work ethic and repayment history," Ethan replied evenly. "My marriage is just proof I'm serious about putting down roots. Or proof you're desperate enough to import a stranger." Eliza's hand found Ethan's under the table, squeezing hard. He squeezed back, drawing strength from the contact. "Mr. Peterson," Eliza said, her voice sharp as scissors. "I left a life in Boston, a difficult life, but a stable one to come west and build something new. That takes a particular kind of courage, as does my husband's decision to risk rejection by reaching out in the first place. We're not asking for charity, we're asking for a business arrangement. Either you believe Ethan's good for the money, or you don't. Our love story shouldn't factor into your financial calculations." Peterson blinked, clearly unprepared for her directness. Mrs. Cole, do you want interest payments or not? Because if you're going to waste our time with judgments about how we met, we can take our business elsewhere." A long moment of silence. Then Peterson's mouth twitched into something that might have been respect. "I'll need collateral. The property you already own plus guarantees against this season's cattle." "Done," Ethan said. "And if you default, you lose everything." "We won't default." Peterson studied them both, then started writing. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Time will tell which." "That's what everyone keeps saying," Eliza murmured, and Ethan had to fight down a smile. They left the bank with loan papers and a handshake, and Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. In the wagon, Eliza turned to him with eyes that sparkled, despite the dust and heat. "We just bet everything on this working," she said. "Yeah." "That's terrifying." "Yeah, but also kind of thrilling." "Yeah." He looked at her, really looked at her, this woman who'd stood up to a banker for him, who'd called him her husband without hesitation, who'd chosen to risk everything on something as fragile as hope. "Eliza, yes, I love you." The words escaped before he could stop them, raw and unpolished and completely honest. Eliza's breath caught her eyes going wide. "You don't have to say it back," he added quickly. I needed you to know." She was quiet for so long he thought he'd ruined everything. Then, "Ask me again in a week." His heart dropped. "Okay." "No, you don't understand." She grabbed his hand, holding tight. "Ask me in a week, because right now, I'm overwhelmed and terrified, and I want to say it back, but I need to be sure I'm saying it for the right reasons. Not because you said it first, or because I'm grateful, or because I'm scared of losing this. I need to say it when I'm sure. Can you give me that?" The honesty in her request, the trust it took to voice it, hit him harder than if she'd said the words outright. "I can give you that. 1 week. 1 week." They rode home in charged silence, the weight of everything unsaid, pressing down, but not crushing. That night, Eliza didn't retreat to the bedroom immediately. She sat with Ethan by the fire, their shoulders touching, watching flames dance, while the New Mexico night pressed close around them. "Tell me about your brother," she said quietly. "You've mentioned him in pieces, but I want to know the whole story." So he told her. About Daniel, 2 years younger and 10 times braver. About the range war that had erupted over water rights, about the bullet that had come from nowhere, and the blood that had soaked into dry earth. About holding his brother while he died, about the guilt that followed him like a shadow because he'd survived when Daniel hadn't. "Sometimes I think that's why Sarah left," he admitted. "She could see I was broken, and she didn't want to hitch herself to damaged goods. Or maybe she was a coward who couldn't handle complexity." Eliza's voice was fierce. "Maybe she wanted easy, and you deserved better than someone who'd run at the first sign of difficulty. You don't know that. I know she gave up on you. I know she chose safety over truth. That tells me everything I need to know about her character." She turned to face him fully. "You're not broken, Ethan. You're wounded. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Broken things can't be fixed. Wounded things heal. Sometimes they heal stronger than before." Her hand found his in the darkness. "We're both wounded, but we're healing. Together." The week that followed rewrote everything Ethan thought he knew about building a life with someone. They worked the land together, argued over fence placement and water allocation, celebrated when the first vegetables came inedible. Eliza learned to shoot, missing the target so consistently that Jake offered to paint a bullseye on the barn just so she'd hit something. Ethan learned that she sang while she worked off-key but enthusiastic, and that the sound made the hard days easier. On the 6th night, a storm rolled in with violence that shook the house. Eliza appeared in the loft doorway, silhouetted by lightning. "Can I stay up here?" she asked. "The bedroom feels too big in the storm." "Yeah, of course." She climbed up, and they lay side by side on the narrow cot, listening to thunder rattle the windows. Her hand found his in the darkness, and they held on while the world raged outside. Tomorrow, she whispered. What? Tomorrow I'll have an answer. His heart hammered against his ribs. Okay. I'm still scared. Me too. But I'm learning that scared doesn't mean wrong. No, it doesn't. They fell asleep like that. Hands clasped, fear's acknowledged hope stretching fragile between them. When morning came, Eliza was already awake, watching him with eyes that held something new. Something that looked like certainty. I love you, she said simply. Not because you said it first. Not because I'm grateful or afraid or trying to make this work. I love you because you're stubborn and honest, and you hold me when I cry without asking me to explain. I love you because you gave me space to become myself instead of trying to mold me into who you needed. I love you because you're you, and I'm me, and somehow that's enough. Ethan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and let himself feel the full weight of what she'd given him. Trust, truth, love without conditions or caveats. It was more than he'd thought he deserved, and everything he'd needed. We're really doing this, he said against her temple. We really are. No going back now. Wouldn't want to. And for the first time since Sarah had left, since his brother had died, since his parents had been buried, Ethan Cole let himself believe in a future that didn't end in loss. The future Ethan believed in arrived with winter, and it came early and brutal. The first snow hit in October, 3 weeks before anyone expected it, catching them with half the wood unstacked and 2 cattle still unbranded. Ethan worked from dawn until he couldn't see his hands anymore, and Eliza worked beside him, her lips turning blue in the cold, but her jaw set with determination that bordered on reckless. Go inside, he told her on the 3rd day, when the temperature dropped so low the water in the trough froze solid. You're gonna lose fingers out here. So are you. I'm used to it. Then I'll get used to it too. She grabbed another armload of wood, stumbling under the weight, but refusing to put it down. We do this together, remember. Together doesn't mean stupid. Good thing I'm the smart one then. Despite the cold and exhaustion, he almost smiled. Almost. Then the wind shifted, and he caught the smell of something wrong, smoke, but not the good kind. Not wood smoke from a chimney. Something darker, more urgent. Jake's place, he said, already moving. Something's burning. They ran through knee-deep snow, and by the time they reached Jake's cabin, flames were licking through the roof. Jake stumbled out the door, coughing so hard he couldn't stand straight. Ethan caught him before he fell. Chimney, Jake gasped. Creosote caught. Whole damn thing went up. Are you hurt? Nothing that matters. But the cabin. He stared at the burning structure, 20 years of his life, disappearing into smoke and ash. It's gone. Everything's gone. Eliza's hand gripped Ethan's arm. He stays with us. Eliza. He stays with us. That's not a question. Jake looked between them, something breaking in his face. I can't. You two are just getting started. You don't need... You're staying, Ethan said firmly. End of discussion. They dragged what they could salvage from the burning cabin, not much, mostly tools and tack, and hauled Jake back through the snow to their place. By the time they got him settled in the loft with blankets and hot coffee, exhaustion had carved itself into all 3 of them like scars. This is temporary, Jake said, his voice rough with smoke and emotion. Just until I can rebuild. You'll rebuild when winter's over, Eliza replied. Until then, you're family. Family stays. Jake's eyes went bright, and he turned away quickly. Ethan understood. Gratitude was harder to handle than almost anything else. The cabin that had felt spacious for 2 became cramped with 3. Jake tried to make himself invisible, spending most of his time in the barn, despite the cold, but the tension of proximity wore on all of them. Small irritations became arguments. Eliza snapped at Ethan for tracking mud inside. Ethan snapped back about her leaving sewing supplies on every surface. Jake apologized constantly for existing, which only made things worse. 2 weeks in, Ethan found Eliza crying in the bedroom. "I'm a terrible person," she said when he asked what was wrong. "Jake lost everything, and all I can think about is how much I want our privacy back. What kind of person thinks that way? A human one." He sat beside her on the bed. "You're allowed to be frustrated. But he's your best friend. He's been nothing but kind to me, and I resent him being here, and that makes me horrible." "You're not horrible. You're just learning that love doesn't make everything easy. Sometimes it makes things harder because suddenly you have more to protect, more to lose." Is this what marriage is? Constant guilt about not being good enough? The question hit too close to his own fears. "I don't know. I've never done this before either." Very reassuring. "You want reassuring or honest?" She laughed despite the tears. "Honest. Always honest." "Then here's honest. I'm frustrated too. I want time alone with my wife. I want to kiss you without wondering if Jake can hear us from the loft. I want to fight with you without an audience. But Jake needed us, and we're going to get through this, and eventually, we'll have our space back. And if we kill each other first, then at least we'll die together." That got a real laugh from her, and some of the tension released. They sat in silence for a moment, and then Eliza said quietly, "I miss Boston sometimes. Isn't that stupid? I hated it there." "It's not stupid. I miss knowing what to expect. I miss being competent at things. Here I'm constantly failing at tasks I didn't even know existed." "You're not failing, you're learning. I burned dinner 3 times this week, Ethan, 3 times. Jake's too polite to say anything, but I see him looking at that charred meat like it's personally offended him. Jake's eaten worse. We all have. That's not the point." She turned to face him, eyes fierce. "The point is, I came here to build something new, and instead, I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Every day is a fight just to not completely fall apart." "Then fight. That's what we do out here. We fight to survive, and some days survival is enough." "Is it?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Is survival really enough?" Before he could answer, Jake's voice carried down from the loft. "Ethan, we got a problem." They rushed outside to find 3 steers dead in the snow, throats torn out. Wolf tracks circled the bodies, not one wolf a pack. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. "They'll be back," Jake said grimly. "Tonight probably. They've got the taste now." "We can't afford to lose more cattle." "I know." Jake looked at him. "We're gonna have to sit up with rifles. Take turns watching." That night, Ethan crouched in the freezing barn with his Winchester across his knees, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Eliza insisted on taking a watch despite his protests, and they argued in fierce whispers until she won by sheer stubbornness. "I'm not useless," she hissed. "I can pull a trigger." "I never said you were useless." "You're treating me like porcelain. I'm not going to break Ethan." "You could get hurt." "So could you. That's not a reason to leave you out here alone." The wolves came at 2 in the morning shadows, moving through shadows' eyes reflecting moonlight. Ethan fired first, and the sound shattered the night. The pack scattered, but not before he saw their size. These weren't desperate, starving animals. These were hunters who'd learned cattle were easier prey than deer. They'd be back. For 5 nights they took turns sitting watch. Exhaustion piled on top of exhaustion, until Ethan couldn't remember what it felt like to sleep more than 2 hours straight. Eliza's hands shook constantly from fatigue and cold. Jake's cough from the smoke inhalation wouldn't go away. On the 6th night, Ethan dozed off. He woke to Eliza's scream and the sound of a rifle shot. He ran outside to find her standing over a dead wolf, the Winchester still smoking in her hands, her whole body shaking so hard she could barely stand. "It got past me," she gasped. "I didn't see it until it was already inside the fence, and I thought I missed. But then it fell, and—" He pulled the rifle from her hands before she could drop it and folded her into his chest. She clung to him, trembling with adrenaline and shock. "You did good." he said into her hair. You saved the herd. I killed something. You protected what's ours. It's not the same. She pulled back and he saw tears streaming down her face. I know it had to be done, but Ethan, I can still see its eyes. Right before I pulled the trigger, I saw its eyes. I know. He did know. He remembered his first kill, remembered the weight of it. It doesn't get easier. You just learn to carry it. I don't want to carry it. Then I'll help you. That's what I'm here for. Jake found them like that, standing in the snow with a dead wolf between them, holding on to each other like drowning people. He didn't say anything, just started dragging the carcass away to where it wouldn't spook the cattle. Practical. Jake always knowing when words would help and when they'd just get in the way. By the time spring finally limped in, they were all different people than they'd been in October. Thinner, harder marked by the winter in ways that went deeper than physical scars. Jake moved back to his rebuilt cabin in March, and the privacy they'd craved felt strange when they finally had it again. Too quiet. Eliza said the first night they were alone. Yeah? I missed you, though. Having you to myself. Missed you, too. They relearned each other slowly. The rhythm of 2 instead of 3. The freedom to touch without self-consciousness. The ability to fight without witnesses. And fight they did about money, about priorities, about the land expansion that was draining their savings faster than anticipated. We're going to lose everything, Eliza said one afternoon, staring at the ledger with its columns of red numbers. The loan payment's due in 2 months, and we don't have half of what we need. We'll get it. How? We can't sell cattle, yet the market's not. We'll get it, he repeated, but even he could hear the hollowness in his voice. She slammed the ledger shut. Don't do that. Don't pretend everything's fine when it's not. I need you to be honest with me even when the truth is bad. Fine. You want honesty? We're in trouble, bad trouble. If we can't make that payment, we lose the house, the land, everything. Happy now? No, I'm not happy, but at least I'm not being lied to. I wasn't lying. I was trying to stay positive. Positive doesn't pay bills, Ethan. I left everything to come here, and I need to know if I'm going to end up homeless and broke because we overreached. The accusation stung worse because she was right. He'd pushed for the land expansion, convinced it was their path to stability. Now it was threatening to destroy them. This is my fault, he said quietly. I made the wrong call. We made the call. Together. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. I'm not blaming you. I'm just scared, and when I'm scared I get mean. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for being human. He moved to stand behind her, hands on her shoulders. We'll figure something out. What if we can't? Then we lose the land and start over. But we don't lose each other. That's the one thing I won't negotiate. She leaned back against him, and they stood like that in the failing afternoon light, 2 people trying to believe in possibilities neither of them could see. The solution came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson arrived a week later with a proposition. The church women's group wants to commission quilts, she announced, settling herself at their kitchen table without invitation. 20 quilts for the new orphanage in Santa Fe. They're willing to pay well for quality work. Eliza looked skeptical. I'm a seamstress, not a quilter. You can sew a straight seam, can't you? That's all quilting is, a lot of straight seams and patience. I'll teach you the patterns. You do the work. We split the profit 60-40 your favor. Why would you do that? Mrs. Henderson's expression softened. Because I was a mail-order bride too 30 years ago, and someone helped me when I needed it. Consider this paying forward. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say yes and get to work. We've got 3 months to finish 20 quilts, and I'm too old to do it alone. For the next 12 weeks, Eliza sewed like her life depended on it, because it did. Her fingers bled. Her back ached. She fell into bed each night too exhausted to speak. But the quilts took shape one after another, each one more beautiful than the last. Ethan watched her transform from uncertain seamstress to master craftswoman, watched her find confidence in the work of her hands. When she delivered the final quilt to Mrs. Henderson and received payment, she stared at the money like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "We can make the payment," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," Ethan corrected. "This was all you." "No." She turned to face him, fierce pride blazing in her eyes. "This was us. You kept the ranch running while I sewed. You believed I could do it even when I didn't. This was us." They made the loan payment with 3 days to spare. That night they celebrated with whiskey Jake had been saving for a special occasion and burned steaks because neither of them cared about cooking properly for once. "To survival," Jake toasted, raising his glass. "To more than survival," Eliza countered. "To actually building something worth keeping." They drank to that, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. They'd survived winter, survived wolves and fires and near bankruptcy, survived the hard truth that love didn't make life easier, it just made the struggle worthwhile. But survival came with costs. Ethan noticed them accumulating like dust in corners. The way Eliza's hands never stopped trembling slightly. The nightmares that woke her gasping at 2 a.m. The weight she'd lost that she couldn't afford to lose. The brittleness around her edges that hadn't been there before. "You're working too hard," he told her one evening. "We all are. You need to rest. I'll rest when we're secure." "Eliza, don't." She held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't tell me to slow down or take it easy or any of that. I know my limits." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like you're about to collapse. Then maybe you should stop standing there judging me and start helping me figure out how to keep us afloat." The words hit like a slap. Ethan's jaw clenched. "That's what I'm trying to do, by making sure my wife doesn't kill herself trying to prove something." "Prove what exactly?" "That you're tough enough, strong enough, that you deserve to be here." "Maybe I am trying to prove that. Maybe I need to prove it to myself." "And what happens when you've proved it? When you've worked yourself into the ground and there's nothing left? What then?" She stared at him, something dangerous flickering in her eyes. "Then at least I'll know I gave everything. That's more than some people can say." The accusation was clear, and it cut deep. Ethan took a step back, anger warring with hurt. "You think I'm not giving everything? I think you're holding back." Her voice shook. "I think you're so terrified of losing me that you're treating me like I'm already gone. Like I'm something to protect instead of someone to partner with. That's not fair. Isn't it? You want me to rest, to slow down, to let you handle the hard things. But that's not what I signed up for. I came here to build a life, not to be kept safe in a corner while you do all the real work." "The real work? You think what you're doing isn't real work?" "I think you see it differently than you see your own work. I think you see mine as optional and yours as essential. And maybe that's true, but it makes me feel like I'm playing house while you're actually living life." The words landed like punches, each one finding a target. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. He had been protecting her, holding her at arm's length from the hardest decisions and harshest realities. Not because she was weak, but because he couldn't bear the thought of this life breaking her the way it had almost broken him. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "You're right. I've been treating you like glass." "I'm not glass. I'm steel. Or I'm trying to be. But I can't get there if you won't let me fail. I don't want you to fail. Neither do I. But failure's part of learning. You can't protect me from it without also protecting me from growth." He'd never thought of it that way. The realization hit him hard. He'd been so focused on keeping her safe that he'd been stunting her, preventing her from becoming the person she needed to be to survive this life. "Okay," he said quietly. "No more treating you like glass. Promise?" "Promise. But you have to promise me something too." What? Promise you'll tell me when you're drowning. Not after, so we can help each other before it's too late. She considered this, then nodded slowly. Deal. They shook on it like business partners, and the formality of the gesture made them both smile despite the tension still crackling between them. They were learning each other in ways the letters had never prepared them for, learning how to fight without destroying, how to be honest without cruelty, how to love each other through the moments when love felt more like work than magic. Summer arrived with its own brutalities. The heat was relentless, the drought worse. They worked until their hands cracked and bled, until exhaustion became a permanent state rather than a temporary condition. But they were building something. Slowly, painfully, one day at a time. Building a life that was theirs, flawed and difficult and absolutely real. The life they'd built lasted until August, when Eliza collapsed in the garden. Ethan found her face down in the dirt, unconscious, her skin burning hot enough to scorch his hands. He carried her inside, terror clawing at his throat, and Jake rode for the doctor, while Ethan tried to bring her fever down with cold water and prayers he didn't believe in. "Don't you dare," he said to her unconscious form. "Don't you dare leave me now. Not after everything." Dr. Morrison arrived 3 hours later, examined her with grim efficiency, and delivered the verdict Ethan had been dreading. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, probably infection from those cuts on her hands. She's been working herself into the ground, hasn't she? She wanted to prove herself. Well, she's proved she's human. Keep her in bed, force fluids, and pray the fever breaks. If it doesn't by tomorrow night. He stopped, but the implication hung heavy. Ethan sat vigil beside her bed, watching her thrash and mumble through fever dreams. Sometimes she called for her aunt, sometimes for him, sometimes for people he didn't know. Once she sat bolt upright and said, "The quilts aren't finished," before collapsing back into delirium. "The quilts are fine," he told her, though she couldn't hear him. "Everything's fine. Just come back to me." By the second day, Jake had to physically drag him away from her bedside to eat. "You're no good to her dead," Jake said bluntly. "Eat, sleep, then get back in there. What if she wakes up and I'm not there? Then I'll be there. You're not alone in this, Ethan." But he felt alone. Desperately, crushingly alone. The woman who'd taught him to hope again lay dying in his bed, and there was nothing he could do but watch and wait and slowly come apart at the seams. On the third night, the fever broke. Eliza opened her eyes just before dawn, focusing slowly on his face. "You look terrible," she whispered. The relief hit him so hard he couldn't speak. He just gripped her hand and tried not to fall apart completely. "How long?" she asked. 3 days. 3. She tried to sit up, and he gently pushed her back down. "The garden, the cattle, I need to... You need to stay in this bed before I tie you to it." Romantic. "I mean it, Eliza. You almost died. Do you understand that you pushed yourself until your body gave out, and I almost lost you?" Something in his voice must have gotten through, because she went still. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it." His voice cracked. "I told you to rest. I begged you to slow down. But you were so determined to prove you were tough enough that you nearly killed yourself doing it." "I had to prove it." "To who, me? Because I already knew. I've known since the day you shot that wolf, since the day you stood up to that banker, since the first letter you wrote me, if I'm being honest. You don't need to prove anything." "Then why does it still feel like I do?" "Because you're scared." He pulled her hand to his chest, pressing it against his heart. "You're scared that if you stop fighting for 1 second, everything will fall apart. But Eliza, you're not fighting alone anymore. You keep forgetting that." Tears slid down her temples into her hair. "I don't know how to stop." "Then I'll help you learn. But you have to let me. You have to trust that I'm not going anywhere, even when you're too weak to prove your worth. What if being weak is all I am right now? Then be weak. I'll carry us both until you're strong again. That's what marriage means." She cried, then deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she'd kept locked down since Boston. He climbed into the bed beside her, careful of her fever-weakened body, and held her through it. When she finally quieted, exhausted and empty, she said softly, "I'm terrified of being a burden." "You're not a burden. You're my wife. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah. Burdens get carried out of obligation. Wives get carried because their husbands would rather break their own backs than watch them struggle alone." She turned her face into his chest. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. I'm not good with words. You're good with the words that matter." Recovery was slow and frustrating. Eliza hated being confined to bed, hated being dependent, hated watching Ethan and Jake do work she felt responsible for. But Ethan held firm, refusing to let her push herself before she was ready. "You're being unreasonable," she argued on the 5th day. "I'm being married to a stubborn woman who doesn't know when to quit." "I'm fine. You stood up yesterday and immediately fainted. That's not fine." I just got up too fast." "Eliza." He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hands in his. "I need you to listen to me. Really listen. When I found you in that garden, I thought you were dead. For 3 seconds before I reached you, I thought I'd lost you. And in those 3 seconds, everything we'd built, everything we'd survived together, none of it mattered. Because without you, all of this is just dirt and work and emptiness." Her breath caught. "Ethan, I'm not done. You came here on faith, on letters and hope and the crazy belief that two broken people could build something whole. And we did. We built something real and difficult and worth fighting for. But if you kill yourself trying to prove you deserve it, then we lose everything anyway. So please, please stop trying to earn your place here and just accept that you already have it." She stared at him, tears streaming silently down her face. "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. Together. Like everything else." By the end of the 2nd week, she was strong enough to sit on the porch and argue with him about fence repairs. By the 3rd week, she was back in the kitchen, though he and Jake still refused to let her do heavy work. The garden had suffered in her absence, but Jake had kept it from dying completely, and she threw herself into salvaging what she could. "Gently," Ethan reminded her when he caught her pulling weeds with the same intensity she did everything. "Remember what gentle looks like was vaguely. Try harder." But something had shifted between them. The illness had stripped away another layer of pretense, exposing the raw truth underneath. They needed each other. Not in some abstract romantic way, but in the concrete reality of daily survival. Without her, his life was incomplete. Without him, hers was unsustainable. They were building each other as much as they were building the ranch, and that work was never finished. The crisis came in September, when a man rode up claiming ownership of their water rights. "Name's Dalton," he announced, not bothering to dismount. "I own the land upstream. Your creek runs through my property first, which means I control the water flow." Ethan's blood went cold. "That creek's been running free for 20 years. Times change. I'm building a dam. Gonna irrigate my own land. What's left over, you can have for a price." "How much?" Dalton named a figure that would bankrupt them twice over. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "That's robbery. That's business. You got a problem with it, take it to court. But legal fees will cost you more than my price, and by the time the judge rules, your cattle will be dead from thirst." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Think it over. I'll be back next week for your answer." He rode off, leaving Ethan staring after him with rage and helplessness warring in his chest. Eliza emerged from the house having heard everything. "We can't pay that," she said flatly. "I know." "So what do we do?" "I don't know." The admission tasted like ash. "Everything we've built, it all depends on that water. Without it, we lose the cattle, the garden, everything." "Then we fight." "With what?" "We barely have enough for next month's supplies. Legal fees would bury us." "Then we fight dirty." Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. He wants to play games with our survival fine. But we're not going down without making him regret it. Jake arrived within the hour, summoned by instinct or luck. When he heard the situation, his face went hard. Dalton's a snake. Been running schemes like this all over the territory. Most folks just pay up because they don't have choice. We don't have choice either, Ethan said bitterly. We can't pay, and we can't survive without that water. Maybe you can't pay in money. Jake's expression turned calculating. But Dalton's got vulnerabilities. Man like that always does. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we find out what he values and make him understand that taking your water rights will cost him more than it's worth. Eliza leaned forward. Keep talking. They spent the next 3 days gathering information. Jake called in favors from men who owed him, men who'd crossed paths with Dalton and lived to regret it. The picture that emerged was ugly. Dalton used legal technicalities and intimidation to squeeze out smaller ranchers, then bought their land for pennies when they went under. He'd built an empire on other people's desperation. He's got a weakness, Jake reported on the 3rd day. Bank examiners coming through next month. Dalton's been cooking his books, inflating his assets to secure bigger loans. If someone were to tip off the examiner, suggest they look closer at his water rights claims. He'd be ruined, Ethan finished. Everything would collapse. Mutually assured destruction, Eliza said softly. We destroy each other, or we both walk away. It's a risk, Jake warned. If he calls your bluff. He won't. Eliza's voice was steel. Because he's got too much to lose. We've only got one piece of land. He's got an empire. He needs to believe we're crazy enough to bring it all down. Ethan looked at his wife, this woman who'd arrived terrified and uncertain 8 months ago, and saw someone who'd been forged into something unbreakable by necessity and choice. You sure about this? No, but I'm sure about us, and I'm sure we don't go down without a fight. When Dalton returned a week later, Ethan and Eliza were waiting on the porch. Jake stood beside them, rifle visible but not aimed. The message was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a standoff. You got my money? Dalton asked, smirking. We've got information, Ethan replied. About your real estate dealings. About the loans you've secured under false pretenses. About the bank examiner who's very interested in taking a closer look at your operation. Dalton's smirk vanished. You're bluffing. Try us. Eliza stepped forward. We've got copies of documents that'll bury you. One word from us and your whole empire comes apart. So here's our offer. You leave our water rights alone and we keep our mouths shut. Or you push this and we all go down together. You'd destroy yourselves just to spite me. In a heartbeat, Ethan said, and meant it. Because we'd rather lose fighting than survive on our knees. Dalton stared at them, calculation working behind his eyes. Finally, he spat into the dirt. You're insane. Probably. Do we have a deal? A long, tense silence. Then Dalton wheeled his horse around. Keep your damn water. But you make enemies today. We already had enemies, Eliza called after him. At least now they know we bite back. When Dalton was gone, Ethan's knees nearly gave out. They'd gambled everything on a bluff, and somehow it had worked. Jake clapped him on the shoulder, grinning like a maniac. That, he said admiringly, was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen you do. It was both, Eliza said, then started laughing high and slightly hysterical. Oh God, we could have lost everything. But we didn't. Ethan pulled her close, feeling her heart racing against his chest. We didn't lose. We won. We survived, she corrected. There's a difference. Is there? She pulled back to look at him, and something in her expression made his breath catch. Yes, because survival is just not dying. What we did, this was living, fighting for what we built instead of just accepting whatever someone else decided we deserved. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't put into words. When they finally broke apart, Jake had diplomatically disappeared, leaving them alone on the porch they'd defended together. "I love you," Ethan said. "Not the woman who wrote those letters. Not some ideal version I built in my head. You. The stubborn, fierce, occasionally insane woman standing in front of me. The one who threatened to destroy a land baron with nothing but information and audacity. I love you too." She traced his jaw with her fingers. "The broken-down cowboy who took a chance on desperate letters. Who taught me that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. Who holds me when I'm strong, and holds me when I'm not, and never makes me choose between the two." They stood there as the sun set, two people who'd met through words and built something real through action. The ranch spread out around them, flawed, difficult, constantly demanding more than they thought they could give. But it was theirs. They'd bled for it, fought for it, nearly destroyed themselves and each other for it. And somehow, impossibly, it had been worth it. That night, lying in bed with Eliza's head on his chest and her arm across his waist, Ethan finally understood what the title of their story should have been all along. Not, "A Cowboy Fell for Her Through Letters." That was just the beginning. The real story was what came after. The woman who'd traveled across a continent on faith. The man who'd learned to hope again. The life they'd built from nothing but honesty and stubbornness, and the refusal to give up on each other even when giving up would have been easier. "Ethan?" Eliza's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yeah." "Do you remember what you said in your very first letter about being broken in ways that don't fix?" "I remember." "You were wrong." She propped herself up to look at him, her eyes catching the moonlight. "We're not broken. We were just unfinished, and we're finishing each other." He pulled her down and kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her lips. "Best thing I was ever wrong about." "Second best," she corrected. "The best was when you thought I'd regret coming here. You haven't regretted it. Not once, not even on the bad days, especially not on the bad days because those are the ones that prove what we built is real." They fell asleep, tangled together, and when morning came with its inevitable demands and difficulties, they faced it the way they'd faced everything else together, stubborn, refusing to break no matter how hard the world pushed back. The ranch would never be easy. The work would never be done. There would be more winters, more droughts, more threats from men like Dalton and forces beyond their control. But they'd survived the hardest test of all. They'd survived each other's honesty, their own fears, and the crushing weight of reality pressing down on their hope. And in surviving, they'd built something that couldn't be broken by anything except their own choice to stop fighting for it. A marriage forged in letters and tempered by struggle. A life that was exactly what they'd promised each other. It would be real, difficult, flawed, and absolutely worth every brutal, beautiful moment. Years later, when people asked how they'd made it work, Eliza would smile and say, "We didn't make it work. We made it honest. The work part just came with the territory." And Ethan would add, "We bet everything on each other. Turns out we bet right." They built their life, one choice at a time. The choice to stay when leaving would have been easier to fight, when surrendering would have been safer to love each other through the moments when love felt more like work than magic. They chose each other every single day, and those daily choices added up to a lifetime neither of them had thought possible when they'd first started writing letters to a stranger. The ranch thrived eventually, slowly, the way real things do. They added cattle, expanded the house, taught their neighbors that the quiet couple on the eastern property had steel spines and wouldn't be pushed around. They survived and grew stronger together, exactly as they'd promised. But the real victory wasn't the land or the cattle or the financial security they eventually built. It was the marriage itself, the stubborn refusal to give up on what they'd started. With nothing but words and hope and faith that broken people could still build something whole if they were willing to be honest about the cracks. Ethan Cole and Eliza Hart proved that love didn't require perfection. It required truth, courage, and the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it, standing side by side, unbreakable. Not because they were without flaws, but because they'd chosen each other's flaws along with everything else. And that choice was the strongest foundation anyone could build on.